Welcome back. We're going to talk about the importance of clinical supervision to an effective practice. And I want to start by asking you a question to consider as I lecture here. What would you like to improve about your counseling skills? And I know it's early in the game, but as you look at the strengths and weaknesses that you see yourself developing as you're learning who you are as a counselor, what would you like to improve? And now, what do you think are the chances that you'll find a supervisor who can help you make those improvements? That will be the tricky part. And that's part of what I want to talk about and ultimately move toward with this lecture, is the idea of facilitating your chances of improving the weaknesses you feel you have and enhancing the strengths you have with a supervisor once you're in a clinical setting. The problem obviously becomes matching supervisors and mental health counselors. You've already experienced that probably. Well, you have experienced that. You know from experience. There are professors you like, professors you don't like, professors you get along well with, professors where you think, just get me through the semester. So you've already had that experience. When you're in a work environment, it's worse because it isn't just get me through the semester, get me through the 2 or 3 years of this program. It's I'm stuck in this job, and if I'm going to work out here, I'm going to have to work with this person. So if you're novice enough, the range of supervisors that are going to help you may be wider than would otherwise be the case, because if you're novice enough, you have a lot of areas where you need help with your skills. And so lots of supervisors from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different personalities can be there and available to you and offer you something. But the range of supervisors from which you can choose is still going to be limited. You may not always have that good match. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of clinical supervision. And if you're missing what's coming across, that's Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Just enjoy it. Okay. Let's talk about models of clinical supervision. One of the first models I want to talk about is what's called the developmental model. It is sequential and hierarchical. It's not surprising given the fact it's a developmental model. And it assumes that there are going to be stages in your counseling development. Again, fairly logical. So it suggests that as uncomfortable as it may be for you to be at some stages in that development, you have to experience all of those stages. You have to work through them and achieve the goals of those stages to become an effective counselor. So very much like lifespan stages, lifespan development, to achieve the next stage, to achieve development, you have to successfully negotiate the previous stage. In the early stages, as a counselor, generally early counseling students, early counselors are immersed in doing the right thing. The whole focus is, can I do it right? They believe there is one right thing to do, or you believe there is one right thing to do, and you're going to find the way, and you're going to do it. One of the frustrations that comes out of that is initially, when you have a limited repertoire, it feels like there is one right thing to do, and you do find it, and you're satisfied. But as you get more clients, as you get more experiences, it's frustrating because there is no single right answer. You find relatively quickly that you have to tailor whatever approach you're using, whatever skills you're using, whatever interventions to a particular client in a particular situation. and the right answer just doesn't exist. So beginning counselors then start creating schemas to help them and their clients understand the issues. And they start attending to the client's story rather than the right answer. But as you move from looking for the right answer, as you start moving toward attending to the client's story and what is unique to this client, it becomes a difficulty then in differentiating essential from non-essential parts of the story. People come in, and you've already experienced this, and what's foremost in their mind as an issue, or what they want to present to you as most painful, is sometimes right on target, but a lot of times the pain they're sharing is so overwhelming that they are giving you essential detail, they're giving you non-essential detail, they're giving you the parts of their life that are amenable to change, they're giving you the parts of their lives that nobody's going to be able to change. And so picking out, being able to figure out what's going to be helpful to intervene, what's not going to be helpful to intervene, that becomes an essential skill as well. Right? The problem becomes, at this stage, again, that if you're not careful, you'll start emphasizing problem solving without considering the full background of the client. Okay, they've given me this whole range of background here. They've given me this whole range of problems, the whole range of their life, and all the incredible chaos they're going through. Let me pluck this out, and we'll problem solve this. Well, that's great. That solves that problem, but it may not solve other problems, or it may not even be a problem that, having been solved, is really going to be that helpful to the client. So you have to figure out which problems the client has that are most essential to solve. And to do that, you have to start probing more deeply. Probing more deeply begins a process of really digging into what the client is telling you. And at first, mental health counselors can be reluctant to do that because it feels like you're confronting the client. It feels like you're probing too deeply. You're using information to confront the client and then contradict what they're saying. It almost seems disrespectful to take someone who's hurting that much and to begin to analyze and pick apart the information they're giving you. So that can be an awkward stage developmentally as well. But it becomes important. All right? It becomes a very important part of this developmental process to be able to say to the client, wait a minute, this isn't what you said here, and now you're saying this. Let me understand how these things fit together, or we need to go here in more depth. Sometimes mental health counselors are surprised when the client is expressing intense feelings of pain and distress, and it slows the process. After all, isn't the client here for healing? Yes, the client's here for healing, but they don't necessarily want to feel that pain. They don't necessarily want to work through that pain. So the clients become resistant. And it becomes a matter of helping the client sit with the pain, work through the pain. It becomes a matter of being with them, having them trust enough that the pain is not unmanageable and that together you can get through the pain and it's going to be okay. This is a lot of work, all right? And at that point, a lot of mental health counselors begin to feel some sense of disillusionment. And that manifests itself in different ways. I'm not ready for this. I don't belong in this field. This is more work than I signed up for. I made a terrible mistake. All the way down to just, I'm not sure about this. I'm hesitant. I'm reluctant. There's a continuum of what people feel, but it's a reevaluation process. Am I really doing what I want to be doing? And that can happen in school, that can happen again once you're out in the field and more independently doing the same things. Right? Clients are more problematic than you thought. Counseling is more complex. It's more difficult. It's more demanding. You end up with people who are resistive. They're refractive. At times they're actually angry with you. They don't want to be doing what you want them to be doing. And this is not what you signed up for either. Clients become reluctant to open up and share. And it's your job at that point to try to get them to open up and share. Right? You also have been told at various points that your own issues may interfere with counseling. It may be that your own issues are interfering with counseling, but you may begin to have an intuitive feel that that's what's occurring, but you're not sure why or how. You just know that you've got a string of clients who seem to be resistive and reluctant to be engaged in the therapy process. So you're not even aware that positive feelings may be part of the problem for you. If you have a rescuer in you, which most of us do, myself included, the desire to really be out there, to really make a difference, to really pull these people out of where they are, can interfere with the process as well. It doesn't just have to be negative feelings. It can be positive feelings that create problems for us. And it can be none of those feelings. It can just be that you're learning the hard way that clients are difficult. So all this is going on as you get immersed in the field. It's an overwhelming time. Got news. All that resolves. You move through that stage and all of that resolves. It really, really does. As you see more clients and as you become familiar with the routine of intake, and this is really important, as you become familiar with how clients interact with you and your particular style and how they respond to the first few sessions with you, you're going to understand the clients and you're going to understand yourself. What you do, what they do, and how that interaction goes. And that becomes important because I could sit here and I could tell you how client interactions occur between me and the client for the first few sessions. That's me. That's not you. Your interaction is going to be slightly different. Your supervisor can tell you how interactions go, but that's going to be your supervisor. And your supervisor's interaction is going to be slightly different. You as an individual are going to have your own style and your own speed and your own pace at which these things occur and play out, and you're going to learn that, and that'll help resolve these things as well. All right? You're able to conceptualize clients. You're able to conceptualize the counseling process. A client walks in, the client begins to describe what's going on, and you still need the history, you still need the background, you still need to probe, but you have an understanding, you have a schema in your mind about what's probably going on. I've seen this before, I've heard this before, and I know how these kinds of issues present, so let me start taking some shortcuts in looking in your background, because I know people who present this way often have this issue. People who present that way often had this occur in their childhood. People who present ta-da often have ta-da. You get better at that, and you get more comfortable with that, and you get more skilled with it. Right. So as your schemas for clients become more complex, you also have more of a grab bag, and it's just there for you. All right. The developmental model is great in its way. It takes you through where you're going to get and how you're going to get there. Some of the problems that exist, it assumes that the environment you're in, particularly straight out of school, is going to be sufficiently stimulating for you to move through all these steps. If you start out in particular and you're working with a very specific client population, for example, if you're working with clients diagnosed with severe intellectual disabilities, if you're working with a prison population, you may have a limited range of options for expanding your repertoire of counseling clients. And I hasten to say, when I say that, there are mental health counselors out there who thoroughly enjoy and have a passion for limited client populations like that. There are people who work with persons with intellectual disabilities all day long and feel that there's enough range and enough resources there that they really never get tired of doing that. So, but a lot of people find that's a limited group, that's a limited area of expertise, and they prefer a broader client base than that. Same thing with prison population. There are a variety of people who end up incarcerated. Certainly in the United States there are a variety of people because we have one of the largest incarceration rates of many countries. But it's the type of services you can provide in prison are limited. So some people find that stifling. Some people prefer something that offers a broader range of services that they can provide. Just at a personal level, I love psychological testing. I love to do psychological testing all the way through. The three components you've got to be able to do if you're going to do psychological testing are, number one, establishing a rapport with the client, number two, doing the testing itself and interpreting it, and then number three, being able to write a report. So there are three very discrete processes in psych testing that you have to have the skills for. Love doing it. Find that, using the same test basically, or the same core battery of tests, time after time is not boring for me because the clients who take the test are so different. A lot of psychologists get bored with testing. They feel like it's repetitive, it's not the kind of thing they enjoy, and they do as little of it as possible. So that's just an example of how different people can see things in different ways. All right. Also, if you have personal issues, as a mental health counselor, those can become sufficiently intrusive or disruptive that it's difficult to develop and grow. I have known excellent therapists, truly excellent therapists, who had to make a choice between their career and their family. That's a difficult decision, but particularly if you're in a position where you're working with a difficult population and there are issues in the home, it may come down to which is more important to me. Where do I want to put my emotional energy? It's a tough field in that way. Not everyone has to make those decisions, not everyone chooses to make those decisions, but that can be there. There are others who struggle with anxiety, the ability to compartmentalize the work experience. And they decided that personal mental health needs overrode the decision to be in mental health counseling. Again, it is a balancing act to have empathy for clients, to be supportive of clients, to truly be there and care about people, and then to be able to put that aside and go home and care about yourself and your family. To compartmentalize in that way is essential if you're really going to take care of yourself as a therapist, as a mental health counselor. In the developmental model, the supervisor is primarily in a teaching role and is working with the mental health counselor to provide advice, education, and a focus. And that will be your first lecture question from this lecture. What is in the developmental model the role of a supervisor? And that is working with the mental health counselor to provide advice, education, and focus. Okay? The next model I want to talk about is the discrimination model. The discrimination model was actually developed by Bernard in 1979, but it's withstood the test of time. It's really a pretty good model. It sees supervision as covering 3 areas. And the first is the focus on counseling performance skills and behaviors. So what the counselor really does during the testing session. What are the performance skills you need to bring? What are the behaviors you're bringing to the session? How are you, in your interactions, teaching the client in essence? And those skills include everything you're learning now, the reflection of feelings, open-ended questions, the ability to confront, immediacy, interpretation, all of those communication skills, those counseling skills and techniques that you've been taught. Right. Skills also include theory-based techniques and interventions, solution-focused scaling questions, when you're disputing irrational beliefs, if you're using Gestalt empty chair, any of those kinds of things, any cognitive techniques, any relaxation techniques, any of that you're bringing. Right. Second is a focus on cognitive counseling skills. How does a counselor think about a client and the sessions and counseling in general? So when you come in, what is your cognitive schema about the counseling session? That doesn't have to be the same cognitive schema for each counseling session. But you're going to have a way that you look at counseling. What is that cognitive schema? What do you see in that interaction with that client that's making this work, or is the approach you're going to take? Right? These are called conceptualization skills. And you want to understand through these conceptualization skills the etiology of the presenting problem and the factors that are going to influence thoughts and feelings and behaviors. That's how you're going to conceptualize the client as well. Right? Case conceptualization like this will often form the foundation, then, of group supervision. And group supervision becomes an important part of the discrimination model. Counselor cognitions during the counseling session can be fodder for supervision. What were you thinking? Not what were you thinking, but what were you thinking during the session that motivated you, moved you, allowed you to process in the way you were processing? And that is what is used during the supervision sessions to understand the dynamics that were occurring between the client and the counselor. Right? The process of interacting in a session is going to require critical cognitive skills. And those critical cognitive skills are empty chair, relaxation, whatever you're doing, disputing irrational thoughts, irrational beliefs. Any techniques like that are going to be part of it. All right. Third, the focus is on personalization. The focus is on counselor self-awareness. How does the counselor feel about the client, about themselves, about the work they're doing? That's important as well, to keep cognitively aware and emotionally aware of oneself in the session. Self-awareness like that can sometimes lead to deep insights. That's great, but it doesn't have to be that way. That's not necessarily the purpose. The purpose is to just keep monitoring what is occurring during the session between yourself and the client, and in particular to keep a monitor on yourself as well as the client. So if you recognize deep meaning, if you get messages from your own childhood that are impacting the counseling experience, that's useful and that's helpful, but that's not necessarily the purpose. To give you a personal example, I've been counseling long enough that I kind of do it with a split mind, in that there is a part of me that is fully invested with the client in the situation. And I am fully present for the client. I am fully there. Everything that is going on, if I'm if I'm operating on all cylinders, everything that is going on, I am with the client in the room, 110%. But there's another part of my mind that is separated out and is watching, observing the two of us together, or me and the family, whoever it is, the couple. But in an observer mode, watching the interactions and processing the interactions so that I really step outside myself and look at what's happening between us. Okay? So that becomes an important process to kind of look at this insight approach that I'm talking about. The other thing that will happen, because of doing this for so long and watching the interactions, I will sometimes just intuitively say things, make comments or interpretations that I don't know are coming, but I end up saying them. When I first started doing that a number of years ago, it scared the hell out of me, because I would make an interpretation and I would think, where did that come from? I've learned over the years that I'm actually pretty dead on with that, because that's the part of me that's fully invested with the client, who is just working on instinct, and my instincts are usually pretty good. So I've learned to allow that to happen. But I do always keep some kind of external processing of the interaction going, because I want to know, am I getting too invested? Am I getting too emotional? Am I getting, are my own issues beginning to interfere here? I want to know those things. And the only way to know those things is to have some part of me that's external to this kind of watching the interaction going on. All right? Fourth focal point is professional behaviors. And this includes some very practical things: being on time for sessions, following protocols for scheduling and canceling sessions, dressing appropriately. It also includes following ethical and legal mandates. And just a note on the professional behavior and cancellations. Different agencies obviously have different positions or policies on no-shows and late cancellations. I don't care what you decide or what your agency decides. I mean, some say we charge $20 or $25 for no-shows. We charge full fee for no-shows. Some say if you have so many no-shows, then we won't reschedule you again, or we won't reschedule you for a time. That's fine. A cancellation with less than 24 hours notice, you're charged. I get all that, and I'm absolutely fine with all of that. The only thing that irritates me is I do know some mental health counselors, some therapists, mental health professionals, who rigidly adhere to their no-show cancellation policy for their clients, but then will either no-show or cancel at the last minute themselves when they have to with clients. And I get it. Court appearances come up, illness comes up, family emergencies come up. But my argument is, if you're going to hold to a very strict rule with a client, then you need to hold with a very strict rule for yourself. So don't have a double standard where you're saying to the client, 24 hours notice for a cancellation to me, but oh, by the way, if I have to cancel with you, I'll let you know that morning. Don't work that. That just is not fair. That's a double message to the client where you're saying, my time is very important, your time is less important. Right? Just my pet peeve. I had to throw it in there. And again, understandably, if a single parent has school delays, there's an illness, times that they can't make sessions unexpectedly, for me, I get that, and I'm willing to let that go. But it's also reasonable to say, there's a boundary here. You've missed three sessions, you've given me no-shows, you've given me late cancellations. I can't do that. All right. Okay, 3 supervisor roles in the discrimination model. First is teacher, providing information and constructing learning experiences during the supervision. It's a fairly formal, fairly didactic approach. And again, because there's so much that therapists or mental health counselors are expected to be using during sessions in terms of intervention skills, that's where the teaching comes in. But the supervisor as teacher is very much realistic in this model. That can include role plays as well. It can include didactic information. The supervisor also acts as a counselor and can apply counseling skills during the supervision to help the counselor activate new insights. Work it out. What do you need to tell me? How do you need to tell me? It isn't actual counseling, but rather it's a counseling strategy designed to address the process of counseling. So supervisors aren't taking the role of a counselor, but they're saying, okay, this is an issue that you have as a human being, which is impacting your ability to counsel. Work with it here and now. Right? They also act as consultants. They're more collaborative. They rely on the counselor to set the agenda for supervision. They won't necessarily say, okay, here's what we are going to do today. They will say to you, what do you need to address today? The discrimination model is not prescriptive about which role the supervisor should take. And there's your second lecture question. How prescriptive is the discrimination model about which role the supervisor should take? It's not. And supervisors will operate from all three of these roles. Generally, my foundational role is as a consultant in a discrimination model. I think if you're in the field and you're working, you know what you need to bring to me. I don't bring it to you. So I like to assume that you have enough experience and you have enough insight that you know what you need help with. All right. Let's talk about peer models. Peer models generally rely on group supervision. The idea is that you can learn as much from your peers as you can from sitting with me or another supervisor. Their primary goal is helping mental health counselors in training to give each other constructive feedback. And there are various options for how that group feedback is structured. But research indicates that the primary takeaway is going to be the opportunity for concrete suggestions from multiple sources. And that's really what I have found, is that if you do group supervision and you offer the opportunity, and you may have found this already too, but if you do group supervision, what's going to happen is you throw out an issue. People are not going to say, gee, I think you have an emotional issue with this, you have a personal issue with this. People are going to say, here's something you can do or try to intervene effectively. There are a number of reasons for that, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, but that's generally what's going to happen with peer supervision. Right? Let's talk about the reality of clinical supervision in the workplace. The reality versus the ideal is, I guess, where we're going at this moment. Within the Purdue Mental Health Counseling Program, believe me, you have received relatively intensive supervision. I have been a part of that process as well. And you have received relatively intensive supervision. You have been well supervised. It will not be the same in the workplace. It simply will not be. It would not be cost effective in the workplace. Supervision in the workplace may be individual weekly. It's more likely to be group. Clinical supervision will not only be from your clinical supervisor, but that clinical supervisor will also probably have input about your salary, about your caseload, and about your financial future with that agency. That is going to make it difficult in many cases to feel fully comfortable acknowledging your weaknesses. You are basically talking about clinical supervision with your boss. So this is someone who has a lot of control over your employment position and is also expecting you to be able to be, emotionally vulnerable, psychologically vulnerable, and say, this is what I need help with as a new mental health counselor. That's a tricky position. Right? If there is group supervision, it will occur with a range of therapists, varying from long-standing professionals in the field to the neophyte, you. Right? And it makes it intimidating at times to acknowledge your status. When you hear older therapists or therapists who have been in the field longer talking about what they've done and what they would do, and you realize that they may not be right, they may not be wrong, but the way they would do it is so much different than what you would have even thought of doing. It's frightening. It's intimidating. Okay. So that can be a problem with group supervision. Right? You also have to deal with the politics of the agency. Again, these are not just people who you come together for an internship, or you come together for a class and that's where you see them. These are people where you come together every day and you work. And you work together on committees, and you work together in various aspects of the office. And they are your coworkers. And after a while, you know which ones you like and which ones you don't like. You know the politics of the office. You know which ones you can trust. You know which ones you can't trust. And here you are sitting in a group supervision with all these other dynamics, which have nothing to do with mental health counseling and have everything to do with the office and the office politics. And you're expected to be sharing with them about clinical issues. It gets tricky. All right? How vulnerable do I really want to be? If you're getting individual supervision, if you have a clinical supervisor who takes you and does one-to-one clinical supervision, then very often in that time you end up triaging the most horrendous incidents that occurred in the past week from your huge caseload. You don't have time to work on skill building. You have time to say, the shit hit the fan here, and this is where the wheels fell off, and oh yes, this client, blah, 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 this client, blah, blah, blah. Okay? There's relatively little time to work on improving skills. You're getting by everything you can get by. If you have developed a significant rapport with your supervisor, a lot of the time in the supervision may be spent talking about your personal lives. The supervisors and or yours. Or you may be spending the time dealing with the politics of the agency rather than dealing with supervision per se. That's another reality that happens very frequently. And talking about your personal lives may seem like, that's an inappropriate use of the time. In some agencies, particularly stressful agencies, that's also a way to decompress. So finding a balance between some time to talk about your personal life and a time to talk about cases. Same thing with the politics of the agency. In some agencies, there's not going to be another time or place that's safe to talk about some of those politics than in that individual supervision time. So again, finding that balance. All right. If you're in a large enough agency that supervision is really taken seriously, in the idea that every case gets referenced, every case is talked about, every case is discussed, you may find that the protocol is to present cases so that every Medicaid case, every Medicare case, or every third-party insurance case is staffed so that the demands that those cases be staffed is met. If that's the case, then these individuals, these clients, will be rapidly described and basically rubber stamped. There's little or no time to discuss what's going on in a case. There's little or no time to dig into the particulars. It's get them in, get them out. I have been in staffings where as many as 50 cases an hour have been handled in that way. 50 cases an hour, that's slightly over 1 minute per case. And that includes time to get introduced, get settled in, and get any announcements in. And we have done 50 cases an hour doing that. I haven't been responsible for it, thank goodness, but I've been in those types of staffings. As a neophyte mental health counselor, as someone who's just coming into an agency, what do? How do you get your needs met? Well, part of what I want to talk about is creating supervision opportunities. So think back, first of all, to your syllabus. And there I said that confronting me, if you believe I was wrong, would be one of the biggest, most difficult practices that you might have to do. This is an example of why. If advocating for the best interest of your client means advocating for appropriate supervision, that's what you need to do. And if you feel you are not being adequately supervised, it's up to you to seek the supervision you need. That's lecture question number 3. I'm giving you an easy one. If you don't feel you're being adequately supervised, it's up to you to seek the supervision you need. Now, how do you do that in a judicious manner? How do you do that safely? First of all, never be afraid to ask a question. That said, supervisors are as harried as you are. We are as busy as you are. So catching us between clients, on the run, whatever, you're likely to get a harried answer. Emailing a concern with appropriate anonymity for the client. Don't put a client's name in an email, just say, I have a question, this is the issue. Asking when they have a few minutes to talk or whatever is never inappropriate. Always feel comfortable doing that with a supervisor. If it's urgent, those of us in the helping professions often don't like to be treated rudely by those we respect. Get over it. The client's needs override you being treated rudely. Okay? I can't tell you how many times, because I share office space with Phoenix Associates. So a lot of therapists running around at different times, and I'm in there. I can't tell you how many times over the years I have been between clients in the main office area, and a therapist has grabbed me and said, I need to talk to you now. And it's a question of, I've got a potential case of physical abuse, do I need to report it? I've got a case of potential sexual abuse, do I need to report it? I've got a case of client who's threatening suicide, what do I need to do? And this doesn't happen every week, but I mean, over the years, this has happened numerous times. I don't like getting caught that way. I don't like being responsible for that. It annoys me, it irritates me. And at the same time, I would not have that therapist do anything else because they are advocating for their client. They are doing what they need to do, which is reaching out to me as for a consult and saying, what do you think should happen? I am so very glad they do it. My momentary human annoyance and irritation, yeah, that's going to be there, and it may show in my eyes when they first ask me. I'm glad they do. I'm glad they don't let my annoyance or irritation stop them, because I want to be there for that. And most supervisors do. Don't worry about a supervisor being annoyed or irritated. Ask the question if you need to ask the question when it's that kind of situation. All right? If you have something where you can't find a supervisor, if you have something where you don't necessarily trust what your supervisor is going to say, find a therapist whose judgment you trust. And see if they're willing to provide informal supervision with you, either as a group or as an individual or whatever. Again, don't get into trouble with the politics of the organization you're in. But as I said earlier at the beginning of this, you have limited options for the supervisors available to you. If this is a therapist, or this is someone who has skills that you think, wow, these are really more along the lines of what I need or what I want, or this particular area, they really have the skills I want, ask them. See if they're willing to help you with that, at least on a time-limited basis. Don't be afraid of that. Right? Many therapists would be flattered to offer that on a time-limited basis. You can offer a nominal payment as well. That doesn't hurt anything. It's a nice touch. If you're doing group, if you can split the cost between 2 or 3 of you, that also helps. But just something to say, I realize I'm taking away from your time. No one expects you to know it all. No one thinks that you're going to walk out of school and know it all. And no one really expects that you're going to find a supervisor who can teach you everything either. But it's up to you to be assertive and say, these are the areas where I know I'm lacking in skills, this is what I need. Some of this, yes, you can do online, you can find videos, you can find resources and gain some of it, but some of it is just on-the-ground training with somebody who's in your agency, who knows you, who learns to understand you as a professional and can give you the feedback you need. And however you do that, it's important that you do. All right. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.